Hey, welcome. Today, we're diving into a very specific interpretation of end times prophecy, and it all hangs on one massive, unresolved question. It's a mystery that honestly could completely change how you look at the future.
It all boils down to this one question. What if one of the most dramatic prophecies in the entire Bible, the total annihilation of an ancient superpower, just never actually happened? This single, glaring inconsistency is the first clue in this whole puzzle.
All right, so our investigation kicks off with the ancient superpower of Babylon. You see, for the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah, its fate wasn't really up for debate. It was sealed with a divine judgment that was supposed to be absolute and totally final.
And this is where things get really weird. That huge gap between the prophecy and what actually went down in history. The Bible predicted a sudden, fiery end for Babylon, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. But the history books, they tell a completely different story. Cyrus the Great of Persia basically walked in and took the city without a fight. It wasn't destroyed at all, it just became a less important capital and kind of slowly faded away over time.
The prophecy was absolute, not just destroyed, but completely erased, to the point that its very building materials, its bricks, would be unusable forever. And yet, not only does Babylon still exist as an archaeological site today, but, and you can't make this up, Saddam Hussein famously started rebuilding parts of it using those very same ancient bricks.
So here's the crucial point. If you take the prophecy literally, then the destruction of Babylon, it hasn't happened yet. For a city to be obliterated in the way it was described, it has to first exist as a major world power. And that suggests the prophecy is actually still waiting to be fulfilled.
Okay, so how on earth could Babylon possibly re-emerge on the world stage? Well, the source material we're looking at points to a very strange, very symbolic vision in the book of Zechariah for a potential clue.
And this vision is, it's pretty bizarre. It starts with this big commercial container, an ephah. Then a woman who an angel literally points to and calls wickedness is shoved inside and it's sealed shut with a heavy lead lid. Then two more women show up with the wings of a stork, which is important because a stork was considered an unclean bird under ancient Jewish law. They pick up this sealed container of wickedness and fly it all the way back to Shinar, the original location of Babylon.
So what in the world does all that mean? Well, this interpretation sees it as a symbolic journey. It suggests that the whole system of false worship, the one that started at the Tower of Babel, which then migrated to other world centers like Rome, will one day literally be packed up and shipped back to its original home. It'll be reestablished in Babylon right before it faces its final prophesied judgment.
Now, let's switch gears from Babylon to another famous end times term, Armageddon. The popular idea is that this is the spot for the final epic battle for the world. But the source material we're drawing from makes a critical distinction here.
You see, instead of being the battlefield itself, Armageddon, or the plains of Megiddo, is presented here as a massive military staging ground. Think of it like England during World War II. It was the place where all the Allied armies gathered before they crossed the Channel for the D-Day invasion. The armies gather at Armageddon, but the real fight, that happens somewhere else entirely.
So, if the big battle isn't at Armageddon, where is it? The book of Revelation gives us this very strange, very specific clue. A conflict so huge that blood flows for 1,600 furlongs. Now that's an ancient measurement, but when you do the conversion, it comes out to exactly 176 miles.
And get this, the distance from that staging ground at Megiddo in the north all the way down to the ancient fortress city of Petra, which was also called Bozrah in the Old Testament, is 176 miles. To the mile. According to this view, that's no coincidence. It's outlining the exact theater of war, a massive battle corridor running right down the length of Israel.
Okay, so all of this is leading up to the climax, the second coming. But to really get it in this context, we first have to separate two key events that often get tangled together. So first, there's the rapture, which is often understood as Christ calling believers up to meet him in the air. But the second coming as it's presented here is a totally different thing. It's not about escaping the earth, it's about returning to the earth and with those believers not for comfort, but for conquest.
And where does this returning king first appear? Isaiah chapter 63 asks that very question. And the answer isn't the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Not at first. He comes from Edom, specifically from Bozrah, the same place at the southern end of that 176-mile corridor. And he's not in pristine white robes. His garments are dyed red from battle.
So the image being painted here, is of a warrior king. He arrives at Petra to rescue a remnant of his people who have fled there for safety. He returns as a conqueror, engaging his enemies in a battle that starts in the south and fights its way north toward Jerusalem. This is the second coming as an act of war.
So what's the ultimate results of all this conflict? Well, according to this interpretation, it's not just the end of one age, but the violent birth of the next one, the establishment of a literal, physical kingdom right here on earth.
And this brings us back to another famous prophecy, Nebuchadnezzar's dream from the book of Daniel. Remember, he saw that giant statue that represented a whole succession of world empires, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. But then, a fifth and final kingdom appears, a stone cut without human hands that smashes a statue to pieces and grows into a mountain that fills the entire planet.
And the emphatic conclusion from this perspective is that this fifth kingdom is not a metaphor for heaven or some kind of spiritual feeling in our hearts. No, it's presented as a tangible, geopolitical reality, a physical kingdom set up by God on this planet that will never be destroyed.
Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. If this whole interpretation, with a restored Babylon, a 176-mile war, and a literal kingdom, is actually correct, how does that reframe one of the most famous lines in all of Scripture? What does it truly mean to pray for God's kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven? It definitely gives you something to think about. Thanks for digging into this with us.